The two leading AI models in the world go head-to-head in this video, as I asked them both to pick an FPL team for Gameweek 8. Then when all the games have been played, we're going to see which one scored the highest. It's Grok versus ChatGPT. So just before we jump into the team selections, I'll quickly let you know what prompts I used to extract this information from the models. So I asked them both to pick an FPL team that was going to do best for this week and this week only, so no future planning or anything like that. And I asked them to stay within a 100 million budget, so it's sort of average for most players. Some players have higher at this point, some lower, so I thought that would be a good place to set the budget at. And that is basically, obviously all the rules apply, like no more than 3 players per team and everything like that. So there it is. Right, so let's kick off with Grok's team, and we'll start in goal, which is the selection there is Gianluigi Donnarumma, and I think like for just like a 1 weeker, this is pretty good. I don't mind this pick at all. I think it's got probably the highest chance of a clean sheet out of all the teams. I know Arsenal have statistically the best defense in the league, but they're also away, and Fulham have been not too bad so far. I'd still count on an Arsenal clean sheet. But Man City being at home and Everton, they're not too bad anymore up front, but they're still a little bit goal shy. Their forwards aren't quite doing it, Barry or Beto, so I think Donnarumma is a pretty good shout there. Okay, on to the defence. So we've got Senesi, Gvardiol, and Calafiori. Like I said, with Gvardiol, I think it's basically the same principle as Donnarumma there. Pretty high chance of a clean sheet. Gvardiol's minutes are pretty good. I mean, I think he's probably the most nailed defender in that Man City squad. Calafiori, I do like. I think at some point he'll start to lose a few minutes to Lewis Skelly, but I do think he'll start for the majority of the games. And the position he's taken up in that midfield role, and he's actually even getting further forward than that and finding himself in the box sometimes or shooting just outside the box. So pretty high chance for an attack in return there as well as a clean sheet. So I really like the Calafiori pick. Senesi is like, it feels like a bit template to me, but also for a reason, right? I think he's very, very solid. Bournemouth in incredible form. I think they're in the top 4 or 5 at the moment. So they're doing really well, and he is very good for defensive contributions, unlike the other two there, Calafiori and Gvardiol. I think they've got a high chance of a clean sheet, definitely, but the 2 points you get for defensive contributions, I think, are way more likely to come from Marcos Senesi. So yeah, pretty good backline there. So on to the midfield, and Grok has picked Saka, Minte, Rice, and Semenyo. So I think loading up on Arsenal this week is probably pretty sensible, I'd say. Declan Rice has been benched and taken minutes off him recently, I think, because of Marino's form has been excellent. Zubimendi's been amazing. I think he's trying to shoehorn Eze into that starting 11 if he can. I'm talking about Arteta there. Saka will definitely start. I can't see a world in which he doesn't start. And, it's up in the air about who out of him or Gyökeres takes penalties. But if you've at least got 50% chance of taking a penalty, if one happens to come about, I think that's good. I think that's better than a player like, I don't know, another player around that price or sort of stature that definitely doesn't have penalties. It kind of takes a bit of the appeal off there. So 50% is better than 0 is what I'm saying for that. Minter is is not a bad shout. I probably wouldn't pick that kind of. I probably wouldn't pick him myself. Basically, he's not on penalties. He's up against a really solid Newcastle defence. Brighton do normally do all right against Newcastle, and maybe there's something to it that Minte used to play for Newcastle, so he knows, I don't know, a little bit extra than you should because he's familiar with the club at some level. I don't know. It's not my favourite pick, but also it's one of those picks that could really work out. And then you have Antoine Semenyo. So, yeah, I mean, that's one of the most obvious picks. I think probably my second pick out of all players, apart from Haaland. I think Semenyo looks amazing. He even took a penalty. So, like, what an asset he is becoming. So there's the midfield there. I think Rice and Minte could be swapped around maybe for something a bit more positive, like maybe like a Mohamed Kudus or Ismail Assar from Crystal Palace maybe, but not too bad overall. And onto the forward line. So we've got Alexander Isak, Erling Haaland, and Isidore of Sunderland. Yeah, so Isak against Liverpool. I do quite like that. Liverpool are at home. I I'm not sure about the winner here because both teams are on a bit of a dodgy, unpredictable form. But that derby game always sort of delivers. It normally delivers, right? So I think there'll be a few goals in this one. I think this is probably one of those games you don't want to own defenders of these teams, but attackers definitely. I think even like an Mbermo maybe or a Sesko could be a good shout for this one because Liverpool look a little bit shaky in defence, but absolutely a Liverpool attacker. Salah you could go for, of course, but he's very, very costly at the moment and not quite performing at his price level. So that's why Haaland's in. You can only really have a good team with one or the other. You can't really. I've tried it, right? I've tried doing a Salah and Haaland draft, and you have to sacrifice in so many other places. It's just not worth it. So I think for the moment, Alexander Isak that's good. You had this thing with Hugo Ekitike. He had like a ban. I don't know if that's sort of been spent yet or anything, but you had Arne Slot say, "Oh, that was stupid." You know, he kind of got a little bit of criticism for that. So maybe Alexander Isak will get his chance to fully start and get as close to 90 minutes as he can against Man United. So I think that's a good shout. Erling Haaland, I mean, enough said, right? You don't really need to explain why he's in the team. He just has to be in there. I think he's probably essential at this point. And a lot of FPL content creators say no one's essential, but I think Haaland is essential. I think this one bucks the trend and breaks the rule there. And then Isidore of Sunderland against Wolves, I don't mind that at all. Don't mind that at all. He's a cheap enabler. Sunderland have looked way stronger than anyone could have thought, and Wolves have looked way worse than anyone thought. So a striker from Sunderland against that shaky, leaky Wolves defence does make a lot of sense. So there's the starting 11. Let's quickly move on to the bench, and then we'll get on to ChatGPT's team. So the bench consists of Dubravka, Xhaka, Richards, and Esteve. So, you know, I think the only one there you'd even consider starting out of anyone over anyone in the starting 11 would be Xhaka because of his fixture. He's also been on pretty good form, but I think you'd still start like Rice or Minte ahead of him. And then obviously you'd start Saka and Semenyo ahead of him. Yeah, the other two just sort of not quite fodder. I really like Richards. I think you could start him every week if you needed to, if you were really going for that budget defense. And then Esteve is just there because, you know, he's 4 million. So there's Grok's team. Let's move on to ChatGPT. So starting off the goalkeeper, ChatGPT has also picked Donnarumma for this team. I think, like I said before, that is pretty obvious. Man City at home, one of the best defences, one of the easiest fixtures, almost picks itself. So there's that. Now the defence, a bit different from Grok's. So it's gone for Lacroix, Gabriel, and Van de Ven. So not a fullback in sight, but I do understand the picks here. Lacroix and Gabriel especially are really good for well, Gabriel is he's a bit on and off, but Lacroix really good for defensive contributions. He's playing for a pretty solid team. His minutes are very nailed, almost 90 every game. Same with Gabriel, you know, one of the most nailed defenders apart from Saliba and Raya in that Arsenal defence. So makes a lot of sense. He's also very dangerous from corners, which Arsenal are known to score. And then you've got Van de Ven. Tottenham still are yet to prove, you know, whether they're still a leaky defence or whether they're a good solid defence now, because they're kind of showing a bit of both of those things. But I do like Van de Ven's price a lot. I like his minutes, and he does pop up, you know, in attacking spots, and sometimes come away with huge hauls where he's getting a clean sheet plus an assist or a goal. So I do quite like that pick. So out of the two defenses, I probably do prefer ChatGPT's at the moment. But let's move on to the midfield. So here is the ChatGPT midfield, and it's gone for a different formation here. It's gone for a 3-5-2. So it's picked Semenyo, Zubimendi, Caicedo, Saka, and Doku. So let's just get the Semenyo pick out of the way. We talked about that in Grok's team. Very obvious choice, has to be in the team for me. Zubimendi's an interesting one. Not known to score a lot of goals at all, but he's a deep line midfielder who makes a lot of defensive contributions. And every now and then he does pop up on the edge of the box with shooting opportunities. And he's very, very good technically. You saw that one, I think, I can't remember what game it was now, but he scored twice. And yeah, so that was, I think maybe that's sort of in the model's thinking a little bit. But he does, it's not very common for Zubimendi to score a goal, right? But sometimes maybe Arsenal, that the system there, sometimes he is in those scoring positions, and you do fancy him because he's a good striker of the ball. Not only that, he's good for assists. You know, he's very good at finessing balls just over the top for maybe if Gyökeres, because he's the one that's going to make those runs to run into, and if he can maybe find his shooting boots a bit more, Zubimendi becomes a really, really good pick. But I really do like that one. It's interesting and not obvious, not template at all. Let's go on to Caicedo. Same sort of thing, really. Everything I said there about Zubimendi applies to Caicedo. I think Zubimendi's a bit more of a technician than Caicedo, and I would wager that Caicedo would pick up more defensive contributions on average than Zubimendi, because I think Chelsea sometimes have a bit more to do defending than Arsenal do, because Arsenal's structure, I think, is a lot more solid than Chelsea's defensively. But Caicedo's getting forward, and he's scoring the odd goal here and there, and he's getting involved. His minutes are very secure, I think, so not a bad pick there at all. Saka, we've already talked about him in Grok's team. I think that's a good pick. I think that's a good solid pick around that price point. You ain't got too many other good options. Palmer, who's injured. Bruno Fernandes, wouldn't touch him with a barge pole. So yeah, and then the other pick is Doku, which I find very, very interesting. Not guaranteed he'll play or he'll start. He probably will play, but will he start? And I try to look at Man City and how they set up, whether it's versus low block teams or teams that are going to try and come at them and keep some level of possession. I think Everton will low block, and it tends to be that Doku does play those games. He's a bit trickier. He's got a bit more acceleration, right, from a standstill point, and that tends to be what sort of unlocks those little spaces in defences that just don't want to budge or move up, right? So I think Doku's got a good chance of starting and probably contributing to a goal or two. Haaland being in those sort of positions so often means that not only does he increase his own chance of scoring, he increases his winger's chance of being able to provide an assist, because the option is there so often. So bit of a risky one, but I do like it, and I think it could really pay off. So onto the forward line. So the forward line, very unsurprisingly, is Haaland and Isak. I think that just makes probably the most sense at the moment. There are some other options you could have gone for, like Gyökeres, but he's not really doing it at the moment. You could go for João Pedro, possibly. That's quite a nice shout. I don't mind that at all. He's got Nottingham Forest, so. But yeah, I think Isak, just his quality is against a very dodgy Man United defence. I think there's probably a higher chance of a big haul there. He could score 2 or 3 potentially, and obviously the same goes of Erling Haaland. But quickly onto the ChatGPT bench. So the bench consists of Dubravka, Richards, De Kalper, and Mark Guiu. So it's gone very skimpy on the bench. I don't think there's anyone you'd want to sort of replace in that starting 11. Maybe Richards needs to come on if one of the current back 3 get injured or something. But I think ChatGPT has really tried to load up that starting 11 and get maximum points there. So here are the 2 full teams side by side on screen, so you can have a little compare and have a look yourself. I have made official accounts for both of these teams, so they are actually in the rankings. They're on FPL as Grok FC and ChatGPT FC. So we will actually be able to track and see how many points they get, and maybe if this video does sort of half well, we can sort of carry this on in the future and see which model is best at FPL. Also on screen, here you go. Here's the actual prompt, the actual screenshot from the models themselves, so you don't have to take my word for it. This is the actual teams they picked. I think their pricing is a little bit off and a little bit outdated, so I wouldn't take that as read if you are going to use that in any sort of form. But anyway, that is basically the video. I'd just like to quickly say, if you did watch up to this point, first of all, thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. And I do have a lot of other content on the channel, which is basically AI predicting the real results for Premier League, Serie A, La Liga, Bundesliga, etc., Champions League and Europa League as well. So there's plenty of content to be coming on the channel, and I do hope you'll join me for that and hit the subscribe button. But in any event, thank you so much for watching. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.